All right, John.
All right, Cade.
There's no getting around it.
What do you got?
3 days ago, you settled a lawsuit where you had sued Uber, your ride-hailing / self-driving competitor, for conspiring with one of your former employees to steal your trade secrets. My editor is sitting right here. If I don't ask about this, I'm in deep trouble. So what I think we all really want to know is, at the heart of this lawsuit is a dispute over a former employee. And that resonates for me and for a lot of people in this room because the talent pool that's able to build these self-driving cars is so small, and there is such a battle for talent. Is this representative of that? Are we going to see more of this or not?
You had to go there first, Cade, didn't you? First of all, let me say we're really happy with the outcome of the case. I mean, for us, from the Waymo side, this was always about and really just about the fact that we needed to ensure that Uber wasn't using our trade secrets or confidential information. That's really what it was all about. And so we were really happy with the outcome that we engineered during the first few days of the trial. It was really a good outcome. We've spent a lot of time in that case talking about the hardware and the trade secrets and confidential information about and that were related to the hardware. But the extra benefit we got from that suit was the ability to understand and ensure that Uber wasn't also using any of our software. And so those trade secrets and that confidential information were also secure as well. Right. So,
but is that going to be an issue with in other situations, just because so many people are using this same technology and there, like I said, a small pool of talent that's sort of dispersing? Is that going to be?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think this was a really special case with a really special set of circumstances. We've had people from Google and Waymo go to companies like Tesla and Apple, and you haven't seen lawsuits associated with that. I think this is a really special case.
Okay. All right, so now the harder questions.
Here you go.
About your, your aims now that this is over, right? And what you're going to do. You've made a lot of noise here and there, but it's unclear to a lot of people, what's really going to happen here. Just succinctly for the people who don't follow your business closely, yeah. You're not a car maker, obviously. You're not a ride-hailing company like an Uber or a Lyft. So explain to them in a broad sense, and then we'll go into specifics,
yeah.
How you aim to really turn this into a business.
I think it's a really important point that we're not a car company and we're not a ride-hailing company. And that gives us so much freedom and opportunity to do one thing that's really important, and that is focus on this technology. We often call it self-driving technology, but an easier way to think about what we're doing at Waymo is we're building better, safer drivers. That's what we're doing. And when you think about that as the key enabler of our future success and our commercialization plan, it opens up a lot of different possibilities when you can think about what we can do. So we've talked about some of them, Cade, right? We're going to start with a transportation service that is similar to the ride-hailing companies that you know well today.
Well, let's talk about that. So you've got a trial going in Phoenix, right? Mm-hmm. And you said you're going to release a service sometime before the end of the year,
That's right.
So what's that service really going to look like? Like when I think about this, and I had this conversation with a lot of people, yeah. When I think about a ride-hailing service that's self-driving, I think of my own experience, and I think a lot of people can relate, using Uber today. Okay, I live in, I work in downtown San Francisco. Right. When I call an Uber, half the time I've got to get on the phone with the driver to tell him where I am. Now, when you don't have a driver, that's a problem, right? You can't get on the phone and talk to them. Are you going to have a self-driving service where I can, hail a car and it can pick me up anywhere? Are you going to have bus stops, so to speak, and just sort of point to point, or how is it going to work?
Yeah, that's the idea. So we're launching in Phoenix. For those of you who haven't been to Phoenix, it's a really big place, over 600 square miles. We're going to be launching in about 100 square miles of Phoenix as we start the service this year. And that's where our early rider program is right now. So in our early rider program, we've had a bunch of people using the Waymo cars, our Pacificas, as their primary mode of transportation. And we've learned so much from these guys, Cade. And so to answer your question directly, absolutely. The idea is you would hail this car, it would show up in minutes, and it would take you wherever you wanted to go in this geo-targeted area of about 100 square miles. No restrictions, no constraints, anywhere you want to go in that zone.
So I've got to stop you there. So I don't know what this says about me, but I spend all my time talking to AI engineers. Like that's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
And if you talk to people about this problem, they say they don't know how to solve it, right? At this point, right? And to me, there are a lot of other issues we can talk about, but that's just one very tiny issue that can show people that self-driving cars may not be as close as kind of the average person thinks they are. Can you tell us how you're going to solve that problem? Am I going to be able to say?
Well, I can tell you that they're largely right. This is a really hard problem to solve, and we've been working on it for 9 years. It's true. It's incredibly challenging, and I'd love to give you an example of the sorts of problems that you have to solve in situations like this, and the sorts of insights we've gained from working with these early writers. I hear
a but come, so you're not going to tell me. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm going to give you a good example.
All right.
Grocery shopping. With a Waymo self-driving car. Getting the rider to the grocery store and having them dropped off in the right location is actually not that hard, although you have to map parking lots and you have to be really good in areas where there are a lot of pedestrians. That's not trivial, but it's manageable. One of the insights we gained from the early rider program is the pickup is much more challenging because after you've completed your grocery shopping, you may have perhaps just stopped in at the pharmacy and you just have a little bag and the car could pick you up right at the exit door, no problem. But if you've got 12 bags of groceries and you need to load up the Waymo Pacifica with 12 bags of groceries, that's going to take some time. And while that car is waiting there, you're blocking traffic. And the person interacting with the car starts to feel a little bit socially awkward. Wait a minute, I'm causing all these other people to wait just because I have to wait for this fancy car to get out of my way. So that's the sort of problem that you have to solve when you want to make a transportation service that really works with this technology. That's just one example. There are hundreds and hundreds of them. We've solved that one, by the way, but there are many, many others that I think those in this space are all just going to have to solve one by one. It's certainly not trivial.
So when this launches, basically, I think it's what's the radius of the service at launch?
So we're starting about 100 square miles.
Okay.
That's what the early rider program area is, but eventually we'll grow to the 600 square miles that comprise Phoenix.
Got it. So explain why you're in Phoenix in particular. I guess one reason is that the weather's good there, right?
Weather's great, although it's really hot in that creates a lot of challenges for things like our big computers and our LiDAR and our radar, which generate, of course, their own heat. So it's challenging from one standpoint. On the other hand, at least it's not snowy and icy, which creates another set of challenges for self-driving cars. More challenging weather creates more challenging problems. So Phoenix is great for a lot of different reasons. It has fairly orthogonal roads, which are more straightforward to deal with. The weather is generally okay. And from a business standpoint, it's really interesting. Because it's so hot, people have really gotten used to their own personal transportation. There isn't a lot of mass transportation optionality in Phoenix. So for us, if we can make this system work and demonstrate that it's a viable product in an area where people love their cars, in their two-car garages, they're able to forego some of that very easy-to-use personal transportation for our new mode of transportation. It's a good indicator for future success of the business.
So you're right, the weather's pretty good.
Yep.
It's not likely to snow a lot.
It's very unlikely.
But what happens when it rains? You know, is there a chance when it rains you can't use your ride-hailing app?
I think our cars in the rain behave as humans behave in rain. We tend to slow down and drive even more carefully, and our self-driving cars can handle rain in that same way.
Okay, so you anticipate they will continue going in the rain.
Sure.
But what if it does snow? You know?
If it snows in Phoenix, I think it would be unlikely. I'm not an expert, but yeah, but it is one of the reasons why we're testing now. So we've tested now in 25 different cities. We're in we're in Detroit right now. Anyone travel from the Detroit area recently? They just got 12 inches of snow, you know this. And we're all jumping up and down at Waymo because it's great to get this sort of experience. So we're gathering all sorts of data right now on the capability of our system in the snow. We have self-driven in the snow in Michigan already, but we're learning how to do that even better with the data that we're accumulating this winter season.
Got it. And you talk about the car slowing down in that situation. What about other situations? Like if you talk to self-driving engineers, one of the things they talk about is that, you know, on some level, you could build a pretty good car that will stop when it needs to stop, right? And avoid hitting what it shouldn't hit. The trick is to kind of make it behave like a human when you're, say, making a left-hand turn against the traffic, where there's oncoming traffic and you've got to sort of ease your way in and make that left-hand turn. Or you're coming in from the right-hand side, there's traffic streaming here, and you want to ease your way in. Again, there's this sort of judgment call you have to make when you have to decide, I can go here, you know, I've got to trust that this guy's not going to hit me on some level. To what extent are these cars going to, in situations, just have to wait until that traffic goes by, and the people behind them are going to have to wait as well?
That's something we call body language, and it's really important. So as we, as humans, drive our cars around, we do those things. We indicate our intentions. For example, at a stoplight, it's our turn, or at a four-way stop, it's our turn to go next. We might inch forward. As we're making a right-hand turn with traffic oncoming, we might nudge our way forward to show that oncoming traffic that we're getting ready to merge. Our cars have those capabilities now. Are they great in every situation right now? No, I mean, honestly not. They're pretty good in almost every situation. Can they get better? Absolutely. One of the things you mentioned, though, is absolutely the case right now, and that is that we've got a lot of confidence in the safety and the capability of our cars because we've driven so much, nearly 5 million miles in autonomous mode on real roads. Last year we drove 2.7 billion miles in simulation, so we've had so much experience.
So explain that to be the simulation thing. I think is really interesting. Explain to the audience what that means. Essentially, you've built a simulation of, say, Mountain View, where you're also testing, or Detroit, or Phoenix. That essentially you've mapped those locations. Yeah. So you have a digital representation that then the cars train in.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So what we've done is, of this nearly 5 million miles, we've taken some of the most interesting situations that we've encountered in the real world, and then we fuzz those events to make them even more challenging. So maybe in one event there was one pedestrian and he was 5 feet away from the car. We make a couple of extra pedestrians and we move them even closer to the car. We increase the complexity of already challenging situations in simulation, and that allows us to test much more rigorously our software releases so that we can have more confidence than we could ever possibly gain just from relying on real-world testing.
Are there worries about being able to trust a simulation as opposed to real-world testing? Some companies, you know, they're insistent that you've got to have cars on the road, driving the roads, collecting, you know, real images to ultimately train your systems on. These systems train on that kind of data. And some people feel like you need the real thing as opposed to the simulation.
You've got to have both, for sure. And I think that's one of the reasons why we continue to put all of these miles on in the real world. We know we learn things from those real world experiences. And it can't be in just one place, which is why we've been in 25 different cities. And again, taking all of those inputs and then throwing them into our CarCraft model where we can make things really challenging and really interesting and really test the software, I think is our secret sauce. I mean, that's how we're getting so much better, so much faster, we think, than the rest of the world.
The other reason you're in Phoenix is because of the regulatory situation, right? Essentially, they've created a framework there that lets you test in this way, right? Yeah. That's the other big reason you're there.
That is a big reason. There are some states, including our home state of California, where right now it wouldn't be possible to do the things that we're doing in Arizona, which is driving without any humans in the front row of the car, which we're doing routinely now in Phoenix. It's pretty cool. We're doing that right now. We couldn't do that in California.
So you've made a lot of noise publicly about that. You've got the technician in the back seat as opposed to the front. You've been making a lot of noise about eventually releasing the service. You've got a good regulatory framework there. They say that things do work pretty well on the road, so why haven't you launched yet? Like, what is it that you're waiting for there?
Yeah, I mentioned our early rider program. These folks are great. They're giving us a lot of input on how well this new product, it's an all-new product for the world. We don't want to screw it up. So we're listening very intently to their feedback. And we continue to do what I would characterize as polishing the car and the experience. I mentioned that we're really confident in the safety level of the cars, but I want to make sure that that confidence is demonstrated in how the cars behave in every situation. I want our first users to feel supremely safe because the car feels like it's being driven by the best driver they have ever seen. Because again, that is our product, right? We're creating a driver. And I want this driver to be perceived by these folks, our first users, as the best driver they've ever experienced. So this is now a level of polish that we're applying to our work.
So does that mean when the service launches in Phoenix, that there will not be a driver behind the wheel to take over in case something goes wrong? Or
that's correct, because if there were a driver behind the wheel, it wouldn't really be a driverless car.
Will there be a technician? Will be a technician in the car?
No technician in the car.
So does that mean you will have remote operation? Meaning if something goes wrong, if there's a disengagement, if you're in a situation where the car can't figure it out on its own, do you have a remote hookup where someone can take control of that car and deal with the situation? Is that how you deal with that?
Yeah. For those of you who've read, has anyone in this room read Waymo's safety report? I'm just curious. Wait, there are a couple of hands. It's amazing. So you guys know, we talked a little bit about that capability, that capacity that we have to remotely monitor the car and inject some level of control if there were a situation where the car ran into something that it couldn't solve. So we do have that capability, for sure.
Okay, okay. And how often do you expect that to happen?
Very rarely.
Okay, got it. So when you do launch this sometime this year, will it be open to anyone? Can anyone in Phoenix download an app and start using this?
You know, that's a great question. I think we will get to that point at some point in the year. I think we're going to start with the early riders who are already with us and in this program, and from them gain some more data and some more confidence, and then open up application to more and more folks.
So my big question is, when this service is opened up, can I go down there as a reporter and get in that car and check it out myself?
Johnny Lou, where's
what do you think?
Comms lead at Waymo?
Johnny,
what do you think? Yeah.
But like, what I wonder about is, to what extent is that, a real PR danger, right? Once you start opening this up and people can do, and really see how it works, it's more difficult to kind of control, the narrative around these cars, so to speak, and people are going to see, the way these cars operate. We had a guy recently who threw himself in front of a driverless car, just to do it.
Yeah.
What's going to happen there? And in a larger sense, well, we can get to the next question. Go ahead.
No, I think, Cade, you bring up something really important, and I think the key point for all of us here in this room, in the US, around the globe, we'll get through those things. It's going to be fine. We can't forget the fact that 1.25 million people die every year on roads around the world. That's a 737 crashing every hour of every day. It's 140 lives lost every hour. There will be speed bumps on the way to a fully autonomous world, there's no doubt. There will be people who jump in front of the car and get angry and wave their finger at you. That's going to happen. And we're going to be fine, right? We're going to get through that. But we have to have that constancy of purpose and the long view that says, yeah, there will be speed bumps, but that can't deter us from getting this right, because the world's been waiting such a long time. We have a saying at Waymo that says that simply safety is urgent. And that's the way that we try and reconcile these two things. We can never lose focus on safety, but with 140 people dying every hour, we've got to be passionate and really driven to get this thing done. So we're not going to let things like that slow us down.
When you talk about safety, there's sort of a flip side to it that I feel gets undercovered. people think about the safety of the car in terms of, is this car going to make a mistake? Is this car going to hit something it shouldn't? The other thing that I think really needs to be thought about, and I would love to hear how you think this plays out, is how are the other cars on the road going to react to this car that is behaving in ways that they don't expect, right? To a certain extent, when I get into a car, I'm driving with the expectation that everyone around me is going to behave like drivers typically behave.
Yeah.
These cars are going to behave in different ways. And, to what extent, you talk about, like these safety reports, so often companies will say, well, our car never did wrong, but there were all these accidents where the other driver was at fault. And in some sense, it's the fault of the driverless car, right? Because it's behaving in ways that those drivers don't understand.
I don't know this company of which you speak, but I do know that we've been driving in and around the Bay Area for years now. And it's clear to me, crystal clear to me, that the frequent drivers who interact with our cars appreciate the consistency of the way they drive. They drive really well. You get used to the way they drive, and if you're a Mountain View resident and you're anywhere near our headquarters in Mountain View, off of San Antonio, you see a Waymo car and you know how it's going to behave. You just know. And I think that's sort of the opposite of what you're saying, right? It's like, no, these cars always behave exactly the same way, whereas a human-driven car, you have no idea. You can sort of maybe guess. A Camry driver might drive differently than a BMW driver, perhaps, I don't know. But I think for the most part, that's going to be a real positive that we see that comes with self-driving cars.
So expanding beyond Phoenix, how quickly is that going to happen? How much is the regulatory situation an issue there? We've had a delay in this bill on Capitol Hill, which I know you're behind to.
With our news in the Senate.
Yeah.
I think there are certainly enough markets to give us a long runway in terms of cities and markets to launch into. We're very optimistic about how things will end up here in California as well. So we do have a plan to move from city to city. And what you'll see in our ramp plan and our launch plan is we'll be tackling incremental complexity, incremental weather. I should say that we're going to be launching not with just a low speed. Again, I want to make this point clear. We're not going to be launching with a 25 mile per hour product or one that's focused on a very, very small geographical area or that only picks up at certain points and drops off at other certain points. We're talking about a full speed service that will serve a very large geographical area with essentially unlimited pickup and drop off points. And our idea is to scale with that as the product specification to other markets that have increasing complexity as we go.
So to circle back to my original question, so you're doing a ride-hailing service in Phoenix. You said ride-hailing in particular.
Yeah.
You talk about all these other options.
Yeah.
Ultimately, how does that work for you as a business, and in terms ultimately of revenue? Meaning, some people feel like you've got these existing ride-hailing services out there. They can more easily plug cars into their networks. You've got Lyft, who is inviting everyone who's building a self-driving car to plug into their network. They have sort of a ready-made model. They know how to operate that type of service. And the people already have the apps on their phones. Mm-hmm. Are you going to actually operate a large-scale service on your own? I know you might do something small in Phoenix, but as you expand, is that going to be you operating that, you running the remote control when things go wrong, another logistical hurdle, or is it going to be somebody else?
So right now, our plan is to launch Waymo as a transportation service. So the simple one-word answer is, yeah, that is the plan. However, I'm going to tell you, we have a lot of options with the position that we have in the technology. And if we wanted to, we would have the opportunity to license to others in the space. So we've got that optionality for sure. And we've spoken a lot about ride-hailing, but there are a lot of other applications of the technology. The mission of Waymo is to safely and easily move people and things around the world. We can do that in a ride-hailing sort of business model, and that's the most interesting because there's so much upside. Just about 0.4% of the 10 trillion miles we humans drive is ride-hailing right now. So there's so much opportunity there, but there's trucking, logistics, and delivery where it makes a lot of sense to imagine a driver like we're developing helping the world. There's personal use licensing. A lot of people are still going to want to buy cars and own cars 10 or 20 years from now. Automakers are interested in licensing our technology from us for that. And then there's the inbound that we're feeling around the world from cities who are interested in working with Waymo to figure out how can they rearrange and reconfigure the transportation networks that they have right now. There's a lot of public transportation infrastructure that's out there that isn't used very well. Okay. Part of the reason for that is sometimes humans are very far away from those terminal points of the transportation system. We can easily move people to those points.
Running out of time, I want to open up to questions, but really quick. So does that mean that you're going to operate a ride-hailing service and a trucking service and compete with all your competitors on all those levels in all those different businesses?
I think in a lot of these areas we will work with partners, and it's one of the ways that we've tried to enter this space is not as classic Silicon Valley disruptors, but really more as enablers of others with incumbent infrastructure in the space. So it's why we've partnered with Avis, for example, and a company like AutoNation, which is the world's, or the US anyway, largest automotive dealer. They have so much back-end infrastructure to help us with things like maintenance and extending the life of our vehicles. It didn't make sense for us to duplicate that. It's why we've partnered with automakers like FCA and others, because we don't want to make cars. We don't need to make cars. The world doesn't need another car maker. But partnering with companies like that makes a lot of sense.
Let's open it up. Any questions? Here we go.
How soon do you see your technology migrating to really heavy commercial vehicles and stuff? Because the technology exists today. It's just a matter of getting the miles on the road and all. And do you see Waymo doing it, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're speaking to like big Class 8 over-the-road trucks, like tractor trailers, we've already demonstrated that technology. We'll have a little bit more to share later, but that makes a lot of sense, and it's actually an easier application of the technology because most of the miles are highway miles, and those long-distance highway miles that truck drivers often take are really difficult from a family standpoint. If you're a truck driver and you've got to do a transcontinental run, it's really challenging to have a normal family life. And I don't know if you guys know this, but there's a tremendous shortage of truck drivers right now. We're probably about 50,000 truck drivers short of what we need right now. We project that number to go to something like 150 or 200,000 truck drivers short compared to the needs of just in the US. So there's a real demand and need for something like that to help solve that problem. But there are also really interesting off-road heavy truck applications too, in places like mines and other things that aren't on the road, but could really benefit from Waymo drivers inside those big trucks.
Another question.
Hey, John, Chris Nicholson from SkyMind. I've got a couple questions for you. It's unfair.
Is this okay, Cade? Are you going to
I know Chris.
2 questions?
He's a great guy.
Okay.
So who's going to own the data? You or the car makers? First question. Second question, will you serve ads in the cars? Are they going to be smartphones that we ride around in? And third question.
Wait, now he's going for 3.
Let me tell you, he's a really good guy.
And can you break even at a typical ride-hailing price point if you cut out the drivers?
If we cut out what?
The drivers, meaning the humans.
Oh yeah. So the answer to the last question is heck yeah. The first question I have to ask, what data are you talking about? And because this is the question one often hears in this space, who is going to own the data? And then the question is, what data do you mean? I mean
movement data for the passengers and all the environmental data that you gather when navigating the car.
So if I have a relationship with a car company and they're selling me cars, and then as Waymo, I'm changing those cars by putting Waymo drivers in them, if they're interested in data that specifically relates to the car, telemetry data from the car that's telling them how the car is operating so that they can gain insights into how to make better cars. That sort of data, fine. But data for the Waymo service, it just would be an issue from a personally identifiable information standpoint to share data on the customer in the car, right? Because the car itself is rather far from, and the brand of the car in that company is rather far from the user who's using that car. So again, I think the answer is depends on the data. Some parts, yeah, but not PII related data. And I don't think the car company is really going to be interested in the LiDAR point cloud that we might be generating from that. Plus, it's an awful lot of data. What was the second question?
About ads. Are you going to serve ads?
In-car. I think it's exciting and interesting to talk about that as a next opportunity, but that opportunity doesn't really present itself until you've delivered the self-driving technology. So I'd say that's probably item number 876 on our list of things to do at Waymo.
Well, John, thanks, especially for answering those last 3 questions from Chris.